Chapter 18. The monk Berthold Schwarz dormitory. Ippolit Matveyevich and Ostap, practically leaning on each other, stood at the open window of the stuffy train car, intently watching the cows slowly wandering off the embankment, the pine trees, and the flimsy wooden platforms of the summer cottages. All the travel jokes had already been told. The Tuesday edition of the Stargrodskaya Pravda had been read down to the classifieds and was now covered in greasy stains. All the chicken, eggs, and olives had been eaten. Only the most agonizing part of the journey remained, the last hour before Moscow. Bykovo, Ostap announced, glancing back at the station that had just flashed by. Now the dachas will start. Cheerful little summer cottages popped up from the sparse woods and groves, edging closer to the railway embankment. Among them were entire wooden palaces, gleaming with the glass of their verandas and freshly painted iron roofs. There were also simple log cabins with tiny square windows, veritable traps for summer residents. Udalnaya rushed by, then Malakovka and Kreskovo vanished somewhere. "Look, Vorobyaninov," Ostap exclaimed. "See that two-story dacha? That's the Medikocentrad dacha." "I see it, nice dacha. I lived there last season." "Were you a doctor?" Vorobyaninov asked absently. "I will be a doctor." Ippolit Matveyevich seemed satisfied with this strange explanation. He was getting anxious. While the other passengers, with the air of experts, surveyed the horizon and, dredging up half-remembered tales of the Battle of Kalka, regaled each other with stories of Moscow's past and present, Ippolit Matveyevich stubbornly tried to picture the State Furniture Museum. In his mind, the museum was an endless corridor, its walls lined with chairs like wallpaper. Vorobyaninov imagined himself walking quickly between the chairs. "It's still uncertain about the Furniture Museum. Will it work out? You, my leader, need to get some electric shock therapy. Don't start panicking prematurely. If you absolutely have to worry, then worry silently." Finding no support, Ippolit Matveyevich began to worry in silence. Train rattled over the switches. Semaphores gaped at the train as it passed. The tracks multiplied. You could feel the approach of a huge railway junction. The grass disappeared, replaced by slag. Switch engines whistled. Switchmen blew their horns. Suddenly, the noise intensified. The train rolled into a corridor between empty trains and, clicking like a turnstile, began to count the cars. White insulated car, Tashkent, urgent return, suitable for fish and meat, equipped with hooks. Dark oak deck planking, soft springs through sleeping car. A dozen freight cars from the Ryazan-Ural Railway, covered in chalk marks. Urgent return to Baku, oil tankers. Workers of the World Unite, Car Club of the Railway Workers' Union of the Moscow-Kazan Railway. 1, 2, 3, 8, 10, platforms loaded with lumber. And then off to the side, a forgotten veteran, a tattered mixed-use car with the inscription, Denikin Front. The tracks doubled again. Train burst out of the corridor. The sun hit them. Low to the ground, the switch lights, resembling little axes, scattered. Smoke billowed. The locomotive, panting, released snow-white sideburns of steam. A cacophony of sounds rose from the turntable. Railroad workers were driving a locomotive into its stall. With a sharp braking, the train's joints creaked. Everything screeched, and it seemed to Ippolit Matveyevich that he had entered a kingdom of toothache. The train docked at the asphalt platform. This was Moscow. This was the Ryazan station, the newest and most modern of all Moscow's train stations. None of the other 8 Moscow stations have such vast and high halls as the Ryazan station. The entire Yaroslavsky station, with its Sudarussian scallops and heraldic chickens, could easily fit into its large waiting room. Moscow's train stations are the city's gates. Every day, these gates let in and let out 30,000 passengers. Through the Alexandrovsky station, a foreigner on rubber soles enters Moscow, wearing a golf outfit, +4s and thick woolen socks on the outside. From the Kursk station, a Caucasian in a brown sheepskin hat with ventilation holes and a tall Volga native with a hemp beard arrive in Moscow. From the Oktyabrsky station, a semi-responsible worker with a briefcase made of wonderful pigskin jumps out. He has come from Leningrad on matters of coordination, agreement, and concrete coverage. Representatives of Kiev and Odessa penetrate the capital through the Bryansk station. Already at the Tikhanova-Pustin station, Kiev residents begin to smile contemptuously. They know perfectly well that Kreshchatik is the best street on earth. Odessans drag with them heavy baskets and flat boxes of smoked mackerel. They also know the best street on earth. But it's not Kreshchatik, it's Lasel Street, formerly Deribasovskaya. From Saratov, Atkursk, Tambov, Ardashevo, and Kozlov, people arrive in Moscow from the Pavletsky station. The smallest number of people arrive in Moscow through the Savlovsky station. These are shoemakers from Taldom, residents of the city of Dimitrov, workers from the Akroma factory, or a dreary summer resident living winter and summer at the Khlebnikovo station. It's not a long ride to Moscow from here. The greatest distance on this line is 130 versts, but from the Yaroslavsky station, people arrive in the capital who have come from Vladivostok, Khabarovsk, and Chita from distant and large cities. Most exotic passengers are at the Ryazan station. These are Uzbeks in white muslin turbans and floral robes, red-bearded Tajiks, Turkmens, Kivens, and Bukharans, over whose republics the eternal sun shines. Concessionaires struggled to the exit and found themselves on Kalinchevskaya Square. To their right were the heraldic chickens of the Yaroslavsky station. Directly in front of them, the Oktyabrsky station, painted in two colors with oil paint, gleamed dimly. The clock on it showed 5 minutes to 11. The clock at the Yaroslavsky station was exactly 10. And looking at the dark blue clock face of the Ryazan station, decorated with the signs of the zodiac, the travelers noticed that the clock showed 5 minutes before 10. Very convenient for dates, Ostap said. There's always a 10-minute head start. Where are we going now? To a hotel, Vorobyaninov asked, stepping off the station platform and looking around timidly. Here in the hotels, Ostap informed him, only citizens arriving on business trips live, and we, dear comrade, are private individuals. We don't like overhead expenses. Ostap approached a cab driver, silently sat down, and with a broad gesture invited Ippolit Matveyevich. To Sivtsev Vrajek, he said, 8 grivnas. The cab driver was stunned. A tedious argument ensued, in which the prices of oats and the key to the apartment where the money was kept were often mentioned. Finally, the cab driver made a kissing sound with his lips. They drove under the bridge, and a majestic panorama of the capital city unfolded before the travelers. Near the restored red gates, thanks to the efforts of the main science directorate, whitewashed painters with their fathom-long brushes, carpenters with saws, plasterers, and masons were located. They closely surrounded the corner of Sadovospasskaya. A spare palace, Ippolit Matveyevich remarked, looking at the long white and green building on Novaya Basmanaya. I worked in this palace too, Ostap said. By the way, it's not a palace but the People's Commissariat of Railways. The employees there probably still wear the enamel badges that I invented and distributed. And here's Myasnitskaya, a remarkable street. You can starve to death here. You're not going to eat ball bearings for the first course and millstones for the second, are you? They don't sell anything else. It was like this before, I remember well. I ordered a lightning rod for my Stargorod house on Myasnitskaya. When they passed Lubyanka Square, Ippolit Matveyevich became worried. Where are we going anyway? He asked. To good people, Ostap replied. There are plenty of them in Moscow, and they're all my acquaintances. And we'll stay with them. It's a dormitory. If not with one, then there's always a place with another. In the square opposite the Bolshoi Theater, a small palm tree was already sticking out, announcing to all citizens that summer had already arrived, and that those wishing to breathe fresh air should immediately leave for no less than 2,000 versts. In the academic theaters, it was still winter. The winter season was in full swing. Posters about the first performance of the opera, The Love for Three Oranges, the last concert before the departure abroad of the famous tenor Dmitry Smirnov, and the world-famous captain with his 60 crocodiles in the first state circus, were plastered on the billboards. There was chaos in Okhotny Ryad. Unlicensed street vendors with trays on their heads ran like geese. A policeman trotted lazily after them. Homeless children sat near the asphalt vat and inhaled the smell of boiling tar with pleasure. At the corner of Okhotny and Tverskaya, the running of carriages, both mechanical and horse-drawn, was especially turbulent. Janitors watered the pavements and sidewalks from hoses as thin as Krakow sausages. From the side of Makovaya, a heavy cart loaded with plywood boxes of Nasha Marka cigarettes drove out. Hey you, he shouted to the janitor, give the horse a bath. Janitor kindly agreed and turned the stream onto the red dray horse. The dray horse reluctantly stopped and, firmly planting its front legs, allowed itself to be bathed. From red it turned black and became like a monument to some horse. The movement of horse-drawn and mechanical carriages stopped. The bathing dray horse stood in the most inconvenient place. Throughout Tverskaya, Okhotny Ryad, Makovaya, and even Titrolnaya Square, cars changed speed and stopped. The scene was surrounded on all sides by lines of buses. Drivers breathed hot gasoline in anger. The mirrored doors of their cabs swung open, and shouts rang out from there. What's the holdup? They shouted from all four sides. Let me give the horse a bath, the driver snapped back. Get out of the way, you crow. A huge crowd gathered. What happened? Such a big traffic jam formed that movement stopped even on Lubyanka Square. The janitor had long since stopped watering the horse, and the refreshed dray horse had managed to dry off and become covered in dust. But the traffic jam was still growing. The driver could not get out of this mess, and the dray horse was still standing across the street. The concessionaires were in the middle of the chaos. Ostap, standing in the carriage like a fire chief rushing to a fire, made sardonic remarks and fidgeted impatiently. After half an hour, the traffic was regulated, and the travelers drove through Vozdvizhenka to Arbitskaya Square, drove along Prikostensky Boulevard, and turning right, found themselves on Sivtsev Vrajek. To the right, to the entrance, Ostap said. Get out, Konrad Karlovich, we're here. What is this house? Ippolit Matveyevich asked. Ostap looked at the pink house with a mezzanine and replied. The monk Berthold Schwarz dormitory for chemistry students. Really a monk. Just kidding, named after comrade Semashko. As befits an ordinary student dormitory in Moscow, the dormitory for chemistry students had long been settled by people who had a rather distant relationship to chemistry. The students had scattered. Some of them had graduated and left for their assignments. Some had been expelled for academic failure. And it was this part, growing from year to year, that formed something between a housing cooperative and a feudal settlement in the Pink House. Rows of new students tried in vain to break into the dormitory. The former chemists were extraordinarily inventive and repelled all attacks. They gave up on the house. It began to be considered wild and disappeared from all the plans of the Moscow Municipal Department. It was as if it didn't exist. But in the meantime, it did exist, and people lived in it. "Where are we going to live here?" Ippolit Matveyevich asked anxiously, when the concessionaires, climbing the stairs to the second floor, turned into a completely dark corridor. "In the mezzanine, light and air," Ostap replied. Suddenly in the darkness, right next to Ippolit Matveyevich's elbow, someone snorted loudly. Ippolit Matveyevich recoiled. "Don't be afraid," Ostap remarked. "It's not in the corridor, it's behind the wall. Plywood, as is known from physics, is the best conductor of sound. Be careful, hold on to me. There should be a fireproof cabinet somewhere here." The scream that Vorobyaninov immediately let out, hitting his chest against a sharp iron corner, showed that the cabinet was indeed somewhere here. "Does it hurt?" Ostap inquired. "It's nothing. These are physical torments, but how much moral torment there was here, it's scary to remember. There was a skeleton of a student named Ivan Ippolit standing right here. He bought it at Sukharevka, but he was afraid to keep it in his room. So visitors first bumped into the cash register, and then the skeleton fell on them. Pregnant women were very unhappy." The companions climbed the spiral staircase to the mezzanine. The large room of the mezzanine was cut into long slices by plywood partitions, 2 arshins wide each. The rooms were like school pencil cases, with the only difference that, in addition to pencils and pens, there were people and Primus stoves here. "Are you home, Kolya?" Ostap asked quietly, stopping at the central door. In response, everyone in all 5 pencil cases stirred and chattered. "He's home," they answered from behind the door. Again, guests came to this fool early in the morning. A female voice whispered from the far left pencil case. "Let the man sleep," grumbled pencil case number 2. In the 3rd pencil case, they whispered joyfully. "The police came to Kolka for yesterday's glass." In the 5th pencil case, they were silent. There, a Primus stove roared and people kissed. Ostap kicked the door. The entire plywood structure shook, and the concessionaires entered Kolka's gorge. The picture that presented itself to Ostap's eyes, despite its outward innocence, was terrible. In the room, the only furniture was a mattress in a red stripe lying on 2 bricks, but this did not bother Ostap. Kolka's furniture had been known to him for a long time. He was not surprised by Kolka himself, sitting on the mattress with his legs up. Next to Kolka sat such a heavenly creature that Ostap immediately darkened. Such creatures are never business acquaintances. They have 2 blue eyes and a clean neck for that. These are mistresses or, even worse, wives and beloved wives. And indeed, Kolka called the creature Liza said you to her and showed her little horns. Ippolit Matveyevich took off his beaver hat. Ostap called Kolya into the corridor. They whispered there for a long time. "Beautiful morning, madam," Ippolit Matveyevich said, feeling very embarrassed. Blue-eyed madam laughed, and without any apparent connection to Ippolit Matveyevich's remark, began to talk about what fools lived in the neighboring pencil case. "They deliberately start the Primus stove so that you can't hear them kissing. But you see, it's stupid. We hear everything. They really don't hear anything anymore because of their Primus stove. Do you want me to show you now? Listen." And the creature, who had grasped all the secrets of the Primus stove, said loudly, "The Zverebs are fools." The hellish singing of the Primus stove and the sounds of kisses could be heard behind the wall. "See, they don't hear anything. The Zverebs are fools, idiots, and psychopaths. See." "Yes," said Ippolit Matveyevich. "We don't keep a Primus stove. Why, we go to lunch at a vegetarian canteen, although I'm against the vegetarian canteen. But when Kolya and I got married, he dreamed of how we would go to the vegetarian canteen together. Well, that's what we do, and I really like meat, and there are cutlets made of noodles, but please don't say anything to Kolya." At this time, Kolya returned with Ostap. "Well, since it's definitely impossible to stay with you, we'll go to Panteley." "That's right, guys," Kolya shouted. "Go to Ivan Ippolit, he's one of us." "Come visit us," Kolya's wife said. "My husband and I will be very happy." "They're inviting guests again," they protested in the far left pencil case. "Don't they have enough guests?" "You are fools, idiots, and psychopaths. It's none of your business," Kolya's wife said in a normal voice. "Do you hear, Ivan Androvich?" they worried in the far pencil case. "Your wife is being insulted, and you're silent." Invisible commentators from other pencil cases gave their voices. The verbal skirmish was growing. The companions went downstairs to Ivan Ippolit. The student was not at home. Ippolit Matveyevich lit a match. A note hung on the door. "I won't be back before 9 p.m., Panteley." "It doesn't matter," Ostap said. "I know where the key is." He rummaged under the fireproof cash register, took out the key, and opened the door. The room of student Ivan Ippolit was exactly the same size as Kalka's, but it was a corner room. One of its walls was stone, which the student was very proud of. Ippolit Matveyevich noted with regret that the student did not even have a mattress. "We'll settle in perfectly," Ostap said, "a decent cubic capacity for Moscow. If we all three lie down on the floor, there will even be some space left. And Panteley is a son of a bitch. Where did he put the mattress, I wonder?" Window overlooked the alley. A policeman was walking under the window. Opposite, in a house built in the manner of a Gothic tower, was the embassy of a tiny power. They were playing tennis behind the iron bars. A white ball flew. Short exclamations were heard. "Out," Ostap said. "The level of play is not high. However, let's rest." The concessionaire spread newspapers on the floor. Ippolit Matveyevich took out the cushion he carried with him, and they lay down. He had barely settled down properly on the telegrams and the chronicle of theatrical life when the sound of an opening window was heard in the next room, and Panteley's neighbor defiantly shouted to the tennis players, "Long live the Soviet Republic! Down with the hijackers of imperialism!" These cries were repeated for about 10 minutes. Ostap was surprised and got up from the floor. "What kind of collector of hijackers is this?" Leaning out over the windowsill, he looked to the right and saw two young men at the neighboring window. He immediately noticed that the young men were shouting about hijackers only when a policeman from the post at the embassy passed by their window. He looked anxiously at the young men and then at the bars where they were playing tennis. His position was difficult. The cries about hijackers continued, and he did not know what to do. On the one hand, these exclamations were quite natural and did not contain anything indecent. And on the other hand, the hijackers in white pants, playing tennis behind the bars, could take it personally and be offended. Unable to understand the situation, the policeman looked imploringly at the young men and ended up attacking the cart and ordering it to turn around. Diplomatic difficulty ended with the arrival of guests to the young men, and they began to solve a chess problem loudly. Ostap fell back on the telegrams and fell asleep. Ippolit Matveyevich had been asleep for a long time.